My husband caught me cheating with our horse. A shocking tale of betrayal and redemption. The protagonist introduces herself as a woman who seemed to have it all: love, a supportive husband, and a cherished life on their small ranch. She speaks about her idyllic marriage, her love for animals, especially their horse, Charlie, and the peaceful, routine life they lead. However, subtle cracks in their perfect world begin to show. Her husband's increasing work commitments leave her feeling lonely and neglected. Her attraction to their horse, Charlie, begins to take root in these moments of solitude. The protagonist recounts her deep love for horses, which began in her childhood. Her bond with Charlie, a gentle and magnificent horse, was something beyond words. She describes the way Charlie's presence made her feel powerful, free, and alive, everything she was missing in her marriage. She begins to realize that, in a way, the horse was becoming a substitute for her emotional needs. Her husband, once attentive and loving, becomes more distant, constantly occupied with his high-powered job that takes him away for days, sometimes weeks. The protagonist spends more time alone, finding solace in the comforting presence of Charlie. She describes her feelings of isolation and longing for emotional connection. As her husband's absence stretches longer and longer, the loneliness begins to consume her. One evening, after a particularly draining week of isolation, she finds herself alone in the barn with Charlie. The air is thick with silence, save for the soft snorts and rustling of the horse. As she brushes Charlie's coat, she feels an unspoken connection that she can't quite explain. Her thoughts grow darker as she feels an almost electric charge between them. Confused, she brushes off the feeling, thinking it's just her mind playing tricks on her. Unable to shake the growing attraction, she finds herself back in the barn late at night. She's drawn to Charlie, not just emotionally but physically. She describes the intense, almost forbidden energy between them, how her skin tingles when she touches him. She attempts to fight the urge, but ultimately gives in to desire. The guilt is overwhelming, but there's also a rush of something darker that pulls her back for more. After first encounter, she feels a wave of shame crash over her. She knows what she's done is wrong, but she can't ignore the powerful emotions and physical satisfaction she found. She tries to tell herself it was a mistake, that it won't happen again, but the pull toward Charlie grows stronger. She feels trapped in her own desires, torn between guilt and a strange, newfound craving for the animal. Her husband returns from another business trip, and for a brief moment, things feel normal again. They share intimate moments, and she feels guilty for what she's been hiding. Her attraction to Charlie has become a secret that weighs heavily on her, and she starts pulling away emotionally from her husband. She begins to find it harder to be fully present with him, as her thoughts keep drifting back to the barn. One night, when her husband is away, she can't resist temptation any longer. She goes into the barn, expecting nothing more than to care for Charlie, but once again, the connection between them escalates. The guilt is gone, replaced by a desperate need to feel the same intensity. Her actions cross a line that she never thought she would, but she is lost in the moment, unable to stop. She keeps the secret of her betrayal hidden from her husband. The tension builds as she feels both exhilarated by her actions and terrified of the consequences. She rationalizes it, telling herself that this affair is a way to escape the loneliness and frustration that have been building in her marriage. But deep down, she knows she's slipping further away from her husband and herself. Her husband begins to notice the changes in her behavior. She's distant, distracted, and more secretive than usual. When he questions her, she brushes him off, claiming that work stress and the demands of the ranch are just weighing her down. But he doesn't seem convinced. He starts to suspect that something is off, but he can't put his finger on it. One day, while her husband is in the barn, he sees something he shouldn't. He doesn't fully understand what's going on, but the sight of his wife alone with a horse, behaving in a way that's far too intimate, leaves him confused and horrified. He doesn't confront her immediately, but can't shake the image from his mind. When her husband finally confronts her, she denies everything. She claims nothing happened, that he's misinterpreting things, but deep down, she knows he's right. The denial feels like the only way to protect herself from the guilt and shame she's drowning in. She begs him to trust her, but the cracks in their relationship are too deep to ignore. The protagonist feels trapped between her desire for Charlie and her commitment to her husband. She begins to visit the bar more frequently, telling herself it's just to take care of the horse. But the truth is, she's addicted to the connection with him. The guilt intensifies, but so does the need. Her marriage feels like it's slipping through her fingers. Her husband comes home early one evening and catches her in the act. He's unable to comprehend what he's seeing, but the horror and betrayal are evident in his eyes. He demands an explanation, his voice trembling with disbelief. She can't deny it anymore, and the floodgates of guilt and shame break open. Her world comes crashing down. The confrontation is intense. Her husband screams, asking her how she could do this to him. He can't fathom the betrayal, and the sense of betrayal cuts deeper than anything he's ever felt. She tries to explain her feelings, but the words fall short. He is too hurt and confused to understand. She begs for forgiveness, but the damage is done. In the aftermath of the confrontation, her husband decides to leave. He says he needs time to process everything, but she knows it's the end of their marriage. She's devastated, but at the same time, there's a part of her that feels free. The secret is out, and now she has to face the consequences of her actions. Alone, she reflects on what has happened. She understands the depth of her betrayal, but she also realizes that her emotional attachment to Charlie wasn't just physical. It was a cry for help, a way to deal with the loneliness and neglect she felt. She feels a profound sadness, but also a strange clarity. She knows she needs to rebuild her life, but she's not sure where to begin. She writes a heartfelt apology to her husband, acknowledging her mistakes and begging for his forgiveness. She doesn't expect him to come back, but she wants him to know how truly sorry she is. It's a first step toward healing, but she knows it will be a long road. The protagonist is torn between her desire to fix the broken pieces of her life and the reality that her marriage may be beyond repair. Her husband, still deeply hurt, suggests that they go to therapy. She agrees, willing to do whatever it takes to save their relationship. But there's a nagging voice inside her that wonders if she even deserves a second chance. Therapy feels like the last lifeline for their marriage, but she knows it may also be the final goodbye. The couple begins therapy with a seasoned counselor who gently encourages them to open up about their emotions and the breakdown of their trust. The protagonist speaks of her loneliness, the emotional neglect she felt, and how she came to rely on Charlie for comfort. Her husband listens, his face a mixture of pain and disbelief. Though the therapist offers him hope for healing, the road ahead feels incredibly difficult. Each session is an emotional roller coaster, where both of them confront the darkest parts of their relationship. As therapy progresses, the couple slowly begins to unravel the deeper causes of protagonist's actions. The therapist explains how the horse, Charlie, became a symbol for emotional fulfillment she had been missing from her marriage. It wasn't about physical attraction. It was about seeking intimacy and companionship, where she felt there was none. The protagonist begins to see that her behavior was a misguided attempt to fill a void in her life. She starts to confront the idea that her marriage needs work, not just for herself, but for the emotional connection that was once lost. Slowly, her husband begins to let his guard down. The therapy sessions help him express his hurt and anger, while the protagonist starts to take full responsibility for her actions. Rebuilding trust doesn't happen overnight, but each small step feels like a victory. The protagonist commits herself to showing her husband that she is capable of change, but she also knows that trust is fragile and can't be restored in a single conversation or apology. As the weeks pass, the protagonist withdraws from Charlie. She doesn't visit him in the barn as often, choosing instead to spend time focusing on herself and her marriage. The emotional attachment to the horse was once overwhelming, but she now sees it for what it was, a coping mechanism rather than true intimacy. There are moments of withdrawal where she misses the comfort Charlie provided, but she pushes through, focusing on her relationship with her husband. One evening, while sitting with her husband, the protagonist has an emotional breakdown. She realizes the full extent of what she has done, not just to her husband, but to herself. Her actions were driven by insecurity, loneliness, and a desperate need for attention. The reckoning is painful, but it's also necessary. She finally sees how her decisions were a cry for help, and she begins to understand the deep emotional work that lies ahead. After months of therapy, her husband tells her that he's still uncertain about their future. He admits that while he loves her, He isn't sure if he can ever fully forgive her. He suggests that they take a break to think things through. The protagonist is devastated but respects his decision. She knows that it's time for her to truly focus on healing herself, regardless of what happens with their marriage. With her marriage hanging in the balance, the protagonist faces the consequences of her actions head-on. She has hurt the person she loves the most, and the weight of that guilt is overwhelming. But she also starts to feel a sense of responsibility for her own healing. She begins to focus on her own mental health, working with therapists and finding healthy outlets for her emotional pain. She knows that she cannot move forward without addressing her own emotional voids. She makes the difficult decision to leave the ranch and start fresh. She moves to a new town where she can begin again without the constant reminders of her past mistakes. It's not an easy decision, but she knows it's the right one. The pain of leaving her husband and the life she once knew is deep, but she understands that this is a first step toward true healing. Living alone for the first time in years, the protagonist begins to adjust to her new life. She spends her days reflecting on her past and learning how to be alone without feeling empty. There are moments when she feels a deep sadness, but she also feels a sense of freedom. She is no longer defined by her mistakes, but by her ability to overcome them. Months pass, and the protagonist starts to build a new life. She takes up new hobbies, forms new friendships, and gradually starts to feel a sense of belonging again. Though the shadow of her past mistakes looms over her, she begins to understand that moving on doesn't mean forgetting. It means accepting and learning from the past. Her healing process is slow, but it's real. The protagonist meets someone new, a man who understands her past and respects her journey. He doesn't judge her, and they take things slowly. It's a healing relationship, built on mutual understanding and emotional connection. The protagonist feels a sense of hope for the first time in years, realizing that love, in its healthiest form, doesn't come with expectations or shame. Despite her new relationship, the protagonist finds herself occasionally struggling with emotional attachment to animals. While she is no longer attracted to Charlie, she still feels a deep emotional bond with animals in general. It's a reminder of the emotional gap she has been working to heal, but she refuses to let it define her. She's committed to continuing her journey of self-improvement. One quiet evening, the protagonist reflects on how far she's come. She remembers the person she used to be, lost, confused, and searching for fulfillment in unhealthy ways. Now, she's someone who knows her worth, understands her past, and is building a life she can be proud of. The reflection is bittersweet, but it's also empowering. She no longer seeks validation from anyone else. Her sense of self comes from within. Years after the divorce, the protagonist writes a letter to her ex-husband. She apologizes once more for her actions, acknowledging the pain she caused him. She also thanks him for the lessons she learned from their time together. She doesn't expect him to respond, but she feels a sense of closure. The letter is a way of letting go and moving forward. The protagonist's journey continues as she works with local organizations to help others who have experienced emotional neglect or unhealthy attachments. She uses her story to inspire others to face their own demons and find healing. Though she's far from perfect, she knows that her past doesn't define her. It's how she chooses to live now that matters. The protagonist returns to the ranch where everything started. The memories are painful, but she faces them head-on. The barn where she once felt so lost now represents the beginning of her healing journey. It's a moment of acceptance, as she understands that the past will always be a part of her, but it doesn't control her anymore. Over time, the protagonist begins to reconnect with her family. Her relationships with them had suffered because of her actions, but now they see the changes in her. They understand the depth of her journey and the work she's put into becoming a better person. Slowly, trust is rebuilt, and the protagonist feels a sense of peace in her familial relationships. One day, the protagonist runs into her ex-husband. The meeting is brief but meaningful. There are no hard feelings, just a mutual understanding of what they once shared and what they have now become. It's an amicable encounter, a moment of closure for both of them. Though her relationship with Charlie is long in the past, the protagonist reflects on the impact he had on her life. Charlie was never just an animal. He was a catalyst for change, a symbol of her struggle to fill the emotional voids in her life. While her relationship with him was unhealthy, It ultimately helped her realize the importance of addressing her emotional needs in healthier ways. The protagonist embraces her new life with optimism. She knows that the road to healing is ongoing, but she feels stronger now. She has rebuilt her relationships, found a new sense of purpose, and learned to love herself. With her past behind her, she faces the future with confidence. The protagonist's future is full of promise. She continues her work, helping others heal, and enjoys a deep, fulfilling relationship. She's no longer haunted by her past, but has turned it into a source of strength. She knows that no matter what challenges come her way, she can handle them. The protagonist continues to work on herself and her journey of healing. She realizes that owning her mistakes isn't just about apologizing to others. It's about confronting the darkest parts of herself and accepting the consequences of her actions. As she reflects on her past, she sees the power in acknowledging what she's done and understanding why she made those choices. It's a painful but necessary step in her healing process. She learns to forgive herself and let go of the shame that once consumed her. With a newfound sense of purpose, the protagonist becomes actively involved in helping others who have faced emotional neglect or have struggled with unhealthy attachments. She shares her story, hoping it will inspire others to face their demons and heal. She volunteers with therapy groups, offering support to those who are learning to rebuild their lives. Through this, she finds fulfillment and a deeper understanding of her own journey. As the protagonist continues her work and personal growth, she reaches a point where she is finally at peace with her past. The shame, the guilt, and the haunting memories of her betrayal no longer have control over her. She accepts that her past mistakes don't define who she is today. She has worked hard to become a better person, and that's what matters. The peace she feels is profound, allowing her to fully embrace her present and future. The protagonist takes time to reflect on Charlie, the horse that symbolized both her pain and her path to healing. Though she no longer feels the intense emotional attachment, she understands that Charlie was a pivotal figure in her life. The horse helped her understand the emotional void she had been trying to fill, and though the relationship was unhealthy, it eventually led her to a place of self-awareness. The memory of Charlie is now a reminder of how far she's come. After years of hard work and dedication to her healing, the protagonist feels ready to close the chapter on her past. She realizes that while her journey was painful and fraught with mistakes, it has led her to become someone she can be proud of. She no longer carries the weight of guilt or regret. Instead, she embraces her past as a part of her growth, recognizing that even the darkest moment in life can lead to a brighter future. Forgiveness is a final, liberating step in the protagonist's journey. She reaches a point where she understands that forgiveness isn't just for others, it's for herself. She forgives her ex-husband for his pain, and she forgives herself for the choices she made. With forgiveness, she feels a sense of freedom that allows her to fully embrace her future. She no longer lives in the shadow of her past. The protagonist is now in a stable, loving relationship, one built on mutual respect, understanding, and emotional connection. She is no longer afraid of love. She no longer seeks to fill voids in unhealthy ways. She has learned how to communicate openly, set boundaries, and prioritize her own well-being. She continues to work on herself and build a life she's proud of, no longer haunted by the mistakes of her past. The protagonist looks forward to the future with optimism. She continues her advocacy work, helping those who have faced emotional trauma and neglect. She finds joy in her daily life, in her relationships, and in the small moments of peace. Her future is no longer clouded by guilt or self-doubt. She knows that with each step she takes, she is continuing to build a life that is full of hope, growth, and healing. As the protagonist reflects on her journey, she realizes that healing is not a destination, but an ongoing process. While the road has been long and painful, she is grateful for the lessons learned along the way. She no longer defines herself by her mistakes or the person she used to be. She is at peace with who she is today, a person who has learned from her past and is now stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. The end of this chapter marks the beginning of a new, healthier life. In the final chapter, the protagonist shares her final reflections on everything she's learned. She writes a letter to herself, expressing gratitude for the strength it took to face her demons and rebuild her life. She acknowledges the complexity of human emotions and relationships and offers advice to anyone who may be struggling with feelings of loneliness, neglect, or guilt. The story closes with a sense of fulfillment and peace as she looks toward the future, knowing that while life will always have its challenges, she is now equipped to handle them with grace and resilience.